Hey there, Kipsters. Today we're going to be working on Module 4, Lesson 18. There's only one slope passing through a given point. There's only one line passing through a given point with a given slope. Your paper might look slightly different from mine, but you'll see the exact same exercises and problems. Examine each of the graphs and their equations. Identify the coordinates of the point where the line intersects the y-axis, one task, and describe the relationship between the point and the equation y equals mx plus b. So over the last few lessons, we've been talking about slope and how slope is the distance between 2 points. You could choose any 2 points on a line to find our slope. We spoke briefly in yesterday's lesson about the standard form of an equation, and the standard form of a linear equation is ax plus by equals c. And then we transformed that equation into what's called our slope-intercept form. Slope-intercept, that's what you'll call this in Algebra 1. And that looks like y equals mx plus b. Throughout lessons 15, 16, and 17, we've given slope the title of M. All right, today we're going to learn what our B is called, So let's do exactly what the what the questions have asked us to do. Let's identify the coordinates of the point where the line intersects the y-axis. So I'm going to look at my graph in A, and the y-axis is my vertical axis, and I see that this point crosses at an x of 0 and a y of 3. Let's look at graph B. Where does the line intersect the y-axis? Yeah, you should have said it intersects at 0 and 7. Just looking at graphs A and B, what do you notice about my ordered pairs, my x and my y, and my equations in both? Okay, hopefully you put some good stuff in for me to evaluate. Let's continue with some more examples. Take a look at example C and example D. Same question. Identify the ordered pair where line C crosses the y-axis. You should have that line C is going to intersect at the point 0 and negative 2. Same prompt, part D. Where does this line cross the y-axis? Yep, at 0 and negative 4. So we've handled the first prompt. Our second prompt asked us to describe the relationship between the points and the equation y equals mx plus b. You can look at any of the 4 graphs. Okay, what are some things you notice about all 4 coordinates? You should notice that for all 4 coordinates, the x is 0. What do you notice about the equation and the ordered pairs? Yeah, you should notice that in each of my ordered pairs, I see a number that is in my equation. I see a 3 here, and I see a 3 in my equation. I see a 7 here, and I see a 7 in the same place of my equation. I see a negative 2 here, and I see a negative 2 in the same place in my equation. And I see a negative 4 here, and I see a negative 4 in the same place in my equation. When you transform a linear equation into the form y equals mx plus b, M is going to represent slope. X and Y are going to be points on the graph, and B that variable b is going to be our y-intercept. So the y-intercept will always have an x-coordinate of 0, and the y-coordinate will be exactly where it crosses the x-axis. Answer a quick question about the y-intercept, and then click continue. Cool. Something that I want to note for you, Daryl, at the bottom of the paper, or actually I'll go back to the front of the paper. So when we're looking at equations in either form, in standard form or in slope-intercept form, there's a variable b in each equation. I want to make a note that those b's are not always the same value. Now let's show that if two straight lines have the same slope and pass through the same point, they are the same line. Find example number 1. Example number 1 says, graph the equation y equals 2 over 3x plus 1. Well, that's one task. Name the slope, 2 tasks, and the y-intercept. So I have 3 pieces of information I need to handle before I know I am done with this problem. Looking only at my equation, what type of slope is this equation going to have? Is this going to be a left to right inclining line or a left to right declining line? So this is going to be a left to right inclining line. That means I'm going to have a positive slope. All right, so to begin to plot a equation in y equals mx plus b form, you have to start with their known point. In slope-intercept form, I know 2 things about the problem. I know my slope is the fraction 2/3, and I know that my y-intercept is where it crosses the y-axis, so my x is going to be 0, and my y is going to be 1. I'll write the equation over the given equation if you need to see. So slope lines up with m, and y-intercept lines up with b. So now that I have that known point, I can go ahead and plot it. Remember, when we're plotting points, we're going to start at our origin, so I'm going to get an x of 0. I'm going to plot right here at a point of 1. Cool. So I've named my slope and I've named the y-intercept point. How could I continue to graph this line? I'm going to need to find another point. What tool do we use to move from one point to another on a graph? Yeah, we use slope to move from one point on a graph. So this means from my given point, I need to move. Remember, our numerators are up or down. I know I'm moving up because this is a positive number, so I'm going to move up 2, 1, 2. And our denominator is our left or right because this is a positive number. I know I'm moving right, so I'm going to move up 1, 2. I'm going to move to the right 1, 2, 3. Gonna plot that point. Where is the next point on the line located? Yeah, my next point on the line is going to be located at 3, 3. Last and final thing, make sure you have your straight edge out on your desk. So to actually graph the equation, I need to connect these 2 points. When I use my straight edge to connect these 2 points, I now have the line of this equation. Remember, you can also use slope triangles to move from one point to the other. So I should be able to move up 2 to the right 3. If I wanted to get to the next point on the line, I would need to move up 2 to the right 3. My line didn't slant correctly, but it moved exactly to the right 3 right there. Let's take a stab at example number 2. Graph the equation y equals negative 3 over 4x minus 2. One task. Name the slope, 2 tasks, and the y-intercept. Based off of our equation only, is this line going to be left to right inclining or left to right declining? Yep, this line is going to be left to right declining, which means it has a negative slope. Okay, something I want to point out about a negative slope for you is your numerator is going to be down, and our denominator, we're going to move to the right. All right, so let's start by plotting our known point. Name the slope for this line. Slope is -3/4. Make sure you bring that negative with it. Name the y-intercept point for this line. The y-intercept point is going to be 0 and -2. What's the first known point I'm plotting on this graph? The y-intercept is the only ordered pair I have to put down anywhere. So I'm going to start at 0, 0, and I'm going to plot 0 and -2. What is the next point on this line using slope to travel there? The next point on the line, I'm going to need to move down 1, 2, 3. I'm going to need to move to the right 1, 2, 3, 4. So I will place that point there. All right, now I want to use my straight edge and I want to line it up to connect the points. I have now graphed the equation y equals -3/4x minus 2. Example 3. Go ahead and answer the questions in advance. Yep, the slope of the equation is a whole number this time, so it's going to be 4. So I'm going to write up here at the top. So m equals 4. Remember, we like to see slope as a fraction. How can I make the number 4 a fraction? Yeah. Going to put it over 1. All right, so my y-intercept point, you should have already answered. My y-intercept is going to be 0 and -7. What's the first thing I need to do to begin to graph this equation once I've named the slope and the y-intercept point? Yep, I want to plot 0 and -7. What's my next step to graph the equation after I've plotted my first known point? I want to use slope to move to the next point. So because my slope is a positive number, I know I'm moving up 1, 2, 3, 4 and to the right 1. What's the next ordered pair or point on this line? 1, 2, 3, 4 to the right 1. The next ordered pair on this line is going to be 2 and 1. I have to double check myself. All right, now I'm going to use a straight edge. Third and final step, you're going to use a straight edge to connect the points. And you have now graphed the equation y equals 4x minus 7. Cool, now we're ready to push into some exercises. Please answer the questions for exercise 1. Go ahead and graph the known point and use the slope to find the second point before you draw the line. What is that second point? Well, let's look at exercise 1's answer. If you've done exercise 1 correctly, you should say that the slope is 5/2. So slope's going to be a fractional value. Our y-intercept is going to be 0 and -4. Okay, so when I graph 0 and -4 and I move up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 and to the right 2, my next point R is going to be located at 2, 1. Exercise 2. Name the slope and the y-intercept point using only the equation. Graph the known point Then use the slope to find a second point before drawing the line. All right, let's take a look at the answers for exercise 2. For exercise 2, you should have said that the slope was, again, it's going to be, slope is going to be a negative number. So slope is -3, and the y-intercept is 0 and 6. So 0 and 6 is my first known point that I plot, 0 and 6. Because slope is negative, I know I'm going to be moving down 1, 2, 3. Because slope is a whole number, I made it a fraction. Put it over 1, so I'm going to move to the right 1, and I have my next point on the line. What's the next point on the line? So I have point P, I have point R. Where would point Q be located? Yeah, point Q is going to be located at 2, 0. Because I would need to go down 1, 2, 3, and to the right 1. Isn't slope awesome? Example 3. Same prompts. Type your answers in the boxes. Alright, so in the equation y equals 1x plus 0, we can actually simplify this equation into y equals x. The y is because anytime I see a 1 attached to the variable x, I know that that's just 1 times x, so I just have an x. And because I'm adding nothing, I can just get rid of that, okay? I'm not adding anything. So if I want to name the slope in this line, m is actually going to equal 1. Let's make it a fraction, 1 over 1. All right, when I talk about my y-intercept, all right, well, I know that for where it crosses the y-axis, my x has to be 0. Remember, math is a language you read from left to right. So if y equals x, what must our y-coordinate be? Yeah, 0. So when you're plotting the line y equals x, wherever you say x is, y must also be the same number. Use the slope to find the next point on the line. What's the next point on the line going to be? Yep, 1, 1. I'm going to go up 1 to the right 1. What's the next point on the line going to be? Up 1 to the right 1. 2, 2. What's the next point on the line going to be? Up 1 to the right 1. All right, if we continue in this fashion, we would fill out the line, but let's go ahead and use our straight edge to connect. All right, I'm going to use our straight edge to connect. You see that when when x is -2, y is also going to be -2. When x is -1, y is also -1. Exercise 4. Look at part C. Draw a different line that goes through the point 0 and 2 with the slope m equals 2 over 7. What do you notice? Yeah, you should notice that you can only draw, I can only draw one line through the given point with the given slope. And that's our objective, our key point for today. There can only be one line that goes through the same point with the same slope. Take a stab at exercise 5 and type your answer for A and B into the box. All right, Kipsters, that wraps up our lesson. Be sure to turn in your packet and begin on your exit ticket and problem set.